Hello, you guys. All right, so I'm starting this a little bit early um, because, well, it's nap time and it was just a good time for me to start. Plus, I have something special planned for my man later. And so I started doing my chores early. So if I move everything up a little bit, I'll be for sure ready whenever it is he comes home, which is likely to be late because I think he has a speaking engagement tonight. So with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into this. A lot of you may have heard of Candace Owens and the comment that she made regarding Hitler. There was a big uproar behind that. But what I found even more fascinating was the entirety of that Q&A session. And so today I want us to sit down and I want us to listen to the Q&A session and just, they say a lot of stuff there. So let me just get into it. I can't even describe it, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you guys so that we can watch this together and give my copyright disclaimer. So it's been protecting me, y'all, because you guys don't realize most of my videos are not actually monetized. Like my channel is monetized, but most of the content I make for you guys is not monetized. Like the video we did yesterday, YouTube either blocks most of my content or they demonetize it, which is cute. That's cute of YouTube. So wait, am I sharing my screen? No, it doesn't look like it. How come my screen is not sharing? Okay, now I think it is. So today will probably be no different, but at least they've stopped blocking my content because a lot of my videos aren't up because YouTube literally just won't let them air worldwide or in most countries. So I'm sticking to these disclaimers, these FBI disclaimers, because I don't like to play with them. So federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use and is allowed for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe of copyright under 17 U.S.C. 107. And let's just jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and play this. I'm going to play it without the sound first. And, oh, okay, this explains so much. So this is the founding of Turning Point UK. Turning Point is a cover organization for white degeneracy to maintain the status quo, as we were talking about, of paternalism, of whites over non-whites. And so I knew when you see the aesthetics of the room, I knew that it was money in the room and money backing this. And you can see here it was hosted by John and Irina. Isn't that strange? John and Irina Mappin, Lord and Lady Plunkett, and Peter Southall. So it's backed by some money. And we're about to see this full-on Black woman who is burning her ends out with a relaxer and a flat iron, trying to keep her hair straight for these white people constantly, sit here and completely do a whole song and dance for them. The Hitler comment is just literally the tip of the iceberg of the BS. But I just want us to look at the aesthetics of the room. The aesthetics of the room are crazy. There are two other people who are not white in that room, but they're servants. You'll see them like just in some random footage as the video goes by serving people. But if this is not the whitest of all white rooms, why what, Joe? Wait, Irene. Why what, Joe? Okay, so it's about to get started. We're not going to listen to this man. I'm going to talk to you guys until Candace and her white handler get on the stage. Essentially, they're doing a Q&A session. And so Turning Point, like I said, is a front for paternalism maintenance worldwide and a collaboration of white people across continents. This is going to be admitted very clearly, and their agenda is going to be spoken about very clearly in the upcoming minutes of this Q&A session that lasts about an hour. Sean Wilson, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. Her hair has nothing to do with anything except for when you take it as a group. I flat iron my hair from time to time. I have a tutorial of a flat iron I did for a trip. But Candace is literally pandering to white people. So she is in the middle of a meeting with all white people, and she's going to start this conversation by debasing herself and uplifting her white handler. So in this case, I would say a lot of her behavior, including her hairstyle, are coming from a place where she's trying to be accepted of whites. And so I wouldn't say that's the case in all cases. I would say it's very likely the case in her case. I don't see her rocking a fro anytime soon. I don't see her rocking her natural locks anytime soon, simply because she would never be accepted in a room full of lords and mistresses and white people to do the work that she's doing, which is to be the Negro voice to pander to Black people to get them on board with the paternalistic movement. And we covered paternalism yesterday for those of you who don't know. Hey, you guys. Okay, so he's about to bring up Candace. I'm going to go ahead and turn the volume up, and I'll pause it every now and again, and we can kind of just discuss. I'm going to try to watch the chat at this. I would try to watch the chat at the same time. Okay, well, Sean Wilson, you're about to get to know her a little better right now. Okay? She's a public figure, so we can hear her talking points, but you're about to get to know her a little bit better right now.
Seem to have forgotten. And anyway, there is humour in that, and mind you, there's a lot of humour in politics here at the moment, if you can see it. So I just want to say welcome to them.
Let me ask you guys, how is the volume? If the volume isn't good, can you push 1 if it is not good? Because I can make it louder if I need to make it louder.
Welcome to everyone who's made the time to come along here. And clearly anyone in this room is prepared to be open-minded, which it would appear that a very large section of our country are not prepared to be open. And the particular problem that I see in which Turning Point seems to be making great inroads in the States to change.
Okay, the volume is not good? Okay. All right, let me fix it. Hold on. All right, I have an idea of how to make this work. So what I'll say to you, Sean, is if you've been watching Candace since she's come out, so have I. And whilst I wanted to like her in the beginning, and I'm not saying I dislike her, she has turned into a whole song and dance show. I mean, just undeniably. There's no denying that whatsoever. Hold on, I'm gonna hook this up to my Bluetooth speaker. Can you go get me the cord for this thing? And then I'm gonna hook my mic up and let my mic listen to it. And I think that should. And then I'm gonna hook my mic up and let my mic listen to it. And I think that should.
Yeah.
Let me make sure that it's switched over. And I think that should. Let me make sure that it's switched over.
Thank you.
All right, let's do another test, and you guys can tell me if you can hear it better.
The majority of our seats are closed to.
All right, let's do another test. You guys can tell me if you can hear it better. Oh wait, it's not connected yet. Hold on. All right, let's do another test. Oh wait, it's not connected yet. Hold on. Oh wait, it's not connected yet. Hold on. All right. How is that, you guys?
Free speech and things that I happen to hold dear. I have two identical sons about to go to university, whether it's in the States or here, I'm not sure at the moment. But it would be nice to think that they had a future where they don't have to be worried about their opinions, and that even if somebody disagrees with them, they don't become aggressive. And, as we've all seen how Charlie and Candace get treated back in the States, we don't want that kind of treatment. So anyway, I just want to welcome them here. I hope that some of their ideas catch on here, and it's our job to see that that happens. Anyway, thanks very much for coming.
Well, I think without much further ado, what can I say? Welcome, Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens.
Hello, everybody. So glad to be here. For those of you that do not know, Candace and I have been at this for about a year together in the most unusual way imaginable. And just to kind of frame the evening, we believe that Western society as we know it is really at a tipping point or a turning point, depending on how you look at it. And obviously with the Brexit debate going on right now, can go two very, very different directions. And what Candace and I have been doing in the States for really 12, 13 months now, have been committing to fight a culture war. And we believe there's something unique and something exceptional about Western civilization and Western values that we should be unapologetic and unafraid to talk about. So when I was 18 years old, I started this organization, Turning Point USA, out of my parents' garage in Chicago, Illinois. And the great irony of the whole thing is I actually never went to college or university. And I started it just with no money, no connections, and no idea what I was doing. But I like to say it's an only in America success story, where a kid from Chicago with just grit, vision, and work ethic could start something from absolutely nothing, travel the country to meet with business leaders and CEOs, to try to believe in the idea of taking back the American universities and the younger generation around the ideas of free markets and limited government. And in 6.5 years now, Turning Point USA is America's largest and strongest student organization, now present on 1,400 college and high school campuses across the country, well over 120 people on staff, and an annual operating budget upwards of $15 million a year, and with over 35,000 grassroots supporters all across the states in all 50 states. And that is something so unique to the American experience that just a kid with no experience could get invested in and see the results from that. And then a year ago at an event, I met this unbelievable talent, Candace Owens. And Candace will tell you a little bit about her story, but when I met her, I knew that she was a total change maker and that she is someone that believes in the ideas of freedom and liberty. And there's an old expression for those of us that love American baseball. It's, you can't teach talent. And Candace is the greatest embodiment of that. Her charisma, her intellect, her wit, and her capacity to put forth ideas is second to none. And she has exploded onto the international stage over the last year, garnering billions and billions of views and impressions, and is probably the leading ambassador for international freedom that I can think of across the world. And she serves as our communications director and leads a project called, for those that don't know, called Blexit, which is the black exit from the Democrat Party. which is kind of fun. So Candace, tell a little about your story. And
Sure.
I just want to stop it here. I only let his intro play because the Q&A is what we're really here for, and they start the Q&A after she gives her intro. Notice he talked about he was an all-American success story, all the great stuff he did, how quickly he accomplished what he accomplished, blah, blah, blah. He referred to her as talent. You know, the talent. That's like an actor. And then she's going to come in, and the first thing she's going to do is she's going to debase herself. The first words out of her mouth, mark my words, are going to be to debase herself and to uplift him. This is symbolic. So let's go ahead and let it play.
Isn't quite as ambitious as Charlie's. I definitely was not starting a company when I was 18 years old.
And that she is someone that believes in the ideas of freedom and liberty. And there's an old expression for those of us that love American baseball. It's, you can't teach talent. And Candace is the greatest embodiment of that. Her charisma, her intellect, her wit, and her capacity to put forth ideas is second to none. And she has exploded onto the international stage over the last year, garnering billions and billions of views and impressions, and is probably the leading ambassador for international freedom that I can think of across the world. And she serves as our communications director and leads a project called, for those that don't know, called Blexit, which is the Black exit from the Democrat Party, which is kind of fun. So Candace, tell a little about your story.
Sure. So my story isn't quite as ambitious as Charlie's. I definitely was not starting a company when I was 18 years old. I like to say that I started in the trappings of Black America. I come from a family of extreme poverty.
So first, I have to remember that my mic is over here. So first, notice that she debases herself as an individual. The second thing she does is she debases our entire community. She goes, well, my situation, not quite as ambitious as his situation, right? She places herself beneath him. This is where she needs to be in a room full of rich white people. And then she says, I got caught up in the trappings of Black America. She debases all of us collectively, which is essential to this conversation. And you'll see why as it goes on.
Out of wedlock. My mother did not graduate high school. She lived in and out of group homes her entire life. And
then it's all the cliches. I was born out of wedlock. My mom didn't graduate high school. She was in and out of group homes her whole life. Like the trappings of Black America. We're just all trash over here. So she's going to do the debasing of Blackness, the debasing of herself. This is her whole entry. Now, you heard his entry as a white man. This is her entry as a Black woman to this room full of white people.
Father separated. They should have separated much sooner, but they eventually did when I was in high school. So when I got into college, I took out massive amounts of student loans because, of course, I learned in high school, if you don't go to college, your entire life will be a failure. And found myself $150,000 in student loan debt. And no degree, because by my senior year, the loan companies had much of a collapse and I couldn't secure a loan for my last year. Didn't care about politics whatsoever. That also is very much by design. Most people are largely ignorant about politics and don't realize that everything that they're experiencing in their lives is in fact because of politics of the past and the future. So I started getting into it, of course, with Donald Trump. He comes down the escalator, and I think everyone in the world paid attention in that moment. If you were not engaged in politics, you at least got slightly engaged when you saw Donald Trump come down the escalator, and he's talking about making America great again. He's offending everybody. The press is up in arms. They're calling him a racist, a sexist, a misogynist. At one point, they went so far as to say he was incestuous and had feelings for his daughter. It got really crazy, really bizarre, really fast. And at that time, I considered myself a Democrat. I considered myself on the left. And I did not want Donald Trump to win. But the differentiator is that I did not think he was a racist or a sexist or a misogynist. I just thought he was ill-equipped for the position that he was running towards. So I thought to myself, is it plausible that racism is being used as a theme to turn Black people into single issue voters, to scare people into voting a certain direction when you use these terms like literally Hitler? It's our favorite thing to call Donald Trump. He's literally Hitler. He literally is not Hitler. But this is something that they say over and over again because the politics of fear, it really straps people into certain ideologies that do not ultimately serve them. So I had this brilliant idea once I figured it out that I was going to quit my job. I was working in private equity at the time, trying to pay down my loans, and I was going to start a YouTube channel. We do not recommend.
So I just want to stop here. Candace trapped a lot of us. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican either. I think that both parties are trash. So like many of you, because I've seen a couple of you mention in the comments, Candace was attractive to a lot of Black people because we weren't down with the Democratic shenanigans anyway, right? We weren't with the 30,000 genders. We weren't with the BS. We weren't with the caping for immigrants, but having no Black agenda. We weren't with that anyway, right? So she's trapped a lot of Black people. But see, what you guys have to recognize is this is a private meeting that was supposed to consist of 10 rich white people. There's about 30 or so people there, all wealthy. And the purpose of this meeting is because they are recruiting whites globally. They talk about this later in this meeting. They are recruiting whites globally to maintain the status quo of paternalism. Understand the context. That's why she debased herself and debased her people. Now they're going to do this, and they're going to lay this plan out later. They're going to do this through politics, right? And they even have an idea of how to target our youth. So understand, I'm letting this all play, but I want you to have a perspective as to what we're really listening to. This is backed by, if you weren't here for the very beginning, it showed who were the money backers for this agenda. And this is some of British royalty. Candace and her white handler go on to say Donald Trump is also backing this. And that they go on to name white countries where they're going to be recruiting whites to this cause. They even talk about concern of her getting banned from the UK. Her and her handler. And they talk about how that will not be happening. So just to put this in perspective, for those of you who were like me, I kept my eye on her, but I saw that she was going to go in the wrong direction when I saw her trying to be in defense of everything that the Republican Party did. And this meeting, I don't think she expected it, or, they expected it because of that one comment to hit the air, because it is a private meeting that we're watching now. This was not for public consumption.
For most people, but it was all I had at the moment. I said, maybe if I get my voice out there and I start talking about these issues in a more cultural way, in a more colloquial way, in a way that you would talk to your friend. Maybe if I make fun of them, the left, in the same way they're constantly making fun of us, they're running around with pussy hats on their head. That's really funny. I'll make a video about feminism and how toxic it's become. And obviously the game changed really quickly for me. By my third video, it had garnered 26 million views worldwide. It was dubbed in Portuguese. It was dubbed in French. And it made me realize that I was tapping at the doors of what I thought was just an American sentiment, but perhaps it's a worldwide sentiment that something is not right, that the press is no longer working for the people, and they're just really trying to control the people. And then I met Charlie Kirk, and I guess we'd like to say the rest is future, because we're certainly creating it.
And we've had so much fun, I have to tell you. And just in the last 13 months, we have seen in America a grassroots revolution brew up from the bottom of young people that are rebelling against what we like to call cultural Marxism. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen this manifest itself. If you have any questions of what that is, just listen to Jeremy Corbyn for like 35 seconds. And that's just essentially cultural Marxism in a soundbite, which is an attack on Western society. Free enterprise is inherently exploitative. The US is a great evil. This is being taught in our universities. And where Candace and I have really struck a chord is we go a level deeper than that, where, and I'm sure this is happening in the UK as well, where victimhood, being a victim, is almost worn as a badge of righteousness. We call this the Oppression Olympics, where there's a competition of who can be the most oppressed victim group. And whoever that person is, they win the award and they deserve the most amount of stuff.
Free stuff.
that someone else must pay for. And what makes Candace so unique and where we've had the success over the last 13 months is given this totally backwards political environment and atmosphere that's been created, Black women are not allowed to be conservatives in the States, especially Black young women that are outspoken like Candace. And so she goes to these universities and people, they say, well, Candace, I've never heard someone speak that way. And Candace says, I believe in you. I believe you should be a victor, not a victim. And you can start to see throughout, let's just use France for an example right now, not exactly going well for them.
It's not.
So we know what's going on in France with the immigrants there, mostly Black immigrants and immigrants of Arab descent. So this is what I want to point out. The victim mentality. And this is why I really hope that you guys watched yesterday's video on paternalism. Because if you remember the quote from Cecile Cook about what they did to the Aborigines, he called it paternalism, right? And he said, and I'm not going to quote it exactly because I'm not about to pull it up right now. He said that the Aborigines somehow began to blame the white man for all their problems. So after they bred them out, killed most of them, so there are not even quite, just a little over 500,000 of them on the planet, right? There's less than 700,000 Aborigines alive. After stealing their children, putting them in institutions, giving them to white families, forcing them to breed with white people in the hopes that they would purify them and kill all. Essentially, it was state-sanctioned legal genocide. It was on the books. It was totally legal. After about 40, 50 years of doing this, he said, oh, they're going to play the victim and they're going to have animosity because the mass media is telling them that all their problems were caused because of white people. He's essentially saying that same thing. And so just so you guys know my mindset with this is I want us to be viewing this in light of the idea of paternalism and how that has looked throughout the diaspora and the world, because they are thinking of this on a global level, not just the United States. And they'll go on to explain this as they're talking.
Not going well. And this idea of victimhood, it ultimately harms the person that is accepting the status. If you accept that you're a victim your entire life, you'll probably end up giving up a lot of your rights because you've bought into some utopian concept that the government's going to somehow fix it. More government, more government. We will be able to defeat sexism if there's more government and you elect Hillary Clinton, right? You'll be able to defeat poverty if we just have more welfare programs. And of course, if you actually look at what the welfare programs have done, Black America has gotten poorer than we were 60 years ago. The single motherhood rate in my community has jumped from 23% in the 1960s to a whopping 74% today. So more government is not actually fixing the issues, and yet they want me to believe that I need to invest in more of it.
And you see examples of this all across the world. And at some point there is, it becomes mathematically impossible and culturally impossible to support these social welfare programs and continue to expand them. And so France is obviously an easy example to pick, where they take the whole month of August off. Basically, they have very, very high tax rates on the rich, so they start to flee the country. And the only way that they can sustain their socialist policies is to try to import millions of people that are adverse to Western values. And so they'll bring in 1 million people from the Middle East that want nothing to do to assimilate. They'll have 6 individuals per family, and they're at complete odds with Western values. And we'll go to university, and this is...
He said 6 people per family, but remember, one of Margaret Sanger's sons had 5 or 6 kids, the one child. So this kids per family is only a problem when they're not white, because Margaret Sanger, she had a kid, and her son had all kinds of kids, 5, 6 children. I think it was all boys and 1 girl or 2 girls or something. She was saying she was happy showing pictures. I showed that footage, if you guys remember it, maybe last week.
Hate speech in some universities in the States, and I don't know if we're allowed to say it here in the UK, so I'll definitely say it, which is all men are created equal, but not all cultures are created equal. And we have to stand and exclaim that from the rooftops, that Western society is not compatible with the culture of Saudi Arabia.
That's exactly correct. So, and teaching students that multiculturalism is a utopian concept. It's a myth. There's no practicality behind it. The application of it doesn't work. If one culture believes that the other culture shouldn't exist, or I shouldn't be able to walk around freely, or if I were a gay man, I should be pushed off of a building, that doesn't work with our Western values. And yet we have a society that's trying to tell us that it can work.
They're mincing it up, but this is why it was so important for us to have that video yesterday. All men are created equal, but all cultures are not created equal. If you go back to the beginning of the video on paternalism yesterday, where I was speaking on the story of that one Aboriginal girl, she said they were taking this out of their home. She was taken at the age of 2, and they were taught to think and be culturally white. They were taught that the Aboriginal way was the wrong way and to forget it and to think and be culturally white. So that is a form of paternalism. Remember, the father of that behavior that went on with those Black peoples, he called it paternalism by political necessity. That's why it was so important for me to present that information first. So I want us to really analyze the words of what's being said and what's behind those words. All men are created equal, but not all cultures are created equal. So what culture is superior? He's saying Western culture is superior. What does Western culture really mean, right? That's European white culture. That is Western culture. That's the dominant world. That's the status quo. And all other cultures must be snuffed out, and we are to conform to the Western way of life. And that's essentially the conversation that's being had now in the most polite of terms, because you know how white people talk. But that's why, this is part of my Whitesplaining series, right? We're going to analyze things according to what they really mean. And so that's why I wanted to do that piece on paternalism yesterday, because this helps put it into context, because we know that they wipe out people's cultures, because that's how you become acceptable to them. It's through the adoption of white culture. And he literally just said it. He said, it's not okay to say it in the United States. It's probably not okay to say it here, but I'm going to say it anyway. All men are created equal, but not all cultures are created equal.
One thing that indicates to us that multiculturalism doesn't work is the fact that they have to censor free speech in order to try to accomplish it. They don't want you criticizing it. They don't want you talking about what the implications are, because they know once you allow the debate, you realize that the ideas are flawed.
That's right. And so we're happy to be here and informally announce, because we are going to do it. We do want to launch Turning Point UK, and we have some great allies here. So over the next day, we're very much in the planning stages of doing that. But Candace and I are committed to take the Turning Point success story, not just throughout Europe, but also take it global. And right now, the globalists, they are counting on the European Union as their test model. And this is why Brexit is so important. It's fundamental to the defense of Western society. Because Brussels should not dictate what the laws London passes. It shouldn't. And those of you that have dealt with the EU, they're bureaucratic at best and statist control at worst. And so what we want to do is we want to take the success story of America, of what we done in America, and bring that defense all throughout Europe.
Yeah, I mean, look, we very much believe that we are in the midst of World War III. People always talk about it. When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen?
Listen to what they're calling it. She's saying we. She means her and all the white people, her handler, and the other white people, because she didn't deal with any Black people. She's only around whites at this point. They are calling it World War III. What is World War III? It's not people taking up arms. It's this fight between whites and non-whites and the preservation of whiteness and white culture and the status quo of paternalism. That is whites imposing their culture and beliefs on others and us acquiescing. World War III. She's saying we believe that, but by the we, she means her handler, and the white people that sent them there to show them how to model what they've used Candace to do as a Black woman. They're there to teach them how to use their Blacks in her position to do what she's doing in the United States. They feel that they are having some success. Because remember, we're like plants and children. It's all good and they'll care for us. This goes back to what we learned last week from that book that we read. It's all good because we are to be treated well as long as we know our place. Once we're not in our place, they'll annihilate us all. And she's referring to it as World War III. And she's going to go on to explain exactly what I did, but in politer, whiter terms.
Right now, it is an ideological war. We are fighting for Western values. America represented sort of the last stand, and then Trump came. And now we're turning and understanding that in the past, wars were won when the UK and the USA allied together and fought. And that's what we need to do here.
Absolutely. And so we're going to be back. We're going to be doing a lot more of this. But we'd love to take some questions because I know that we've been getting a lot of questions throughout the night. And we'll touch on a variety of different topics. Just other couple quick facts. Candace and I have a great admiration for President Trump and for the First Family, and we've dealt a lot with him on many different things. And you can't believe what The Guardian says about President Trump. You can take that from someone who's actually been attacked by The Guardian, just so you understand how out of line the British press has become. I thought I need to tell you guys this. They said in the headline of the article that Candace was a neo-Nazi supporter, which last time I checked, Candace was black. So I don't understand how that one works.
You know what? This reminds me of what Dave Chappelle did, the black white supremacist, the blind dude. You can be black and be a white supremacist. You can't. I did a video on this when I first started my channel. Black white supremacy. I said Jesse Lee Peterson was a black white supremacist. Like there's a lot of black white supremacists that are walking around.
So they might have something coming for them very soon. But we're very close with the president and the First Family in the States, and we understand this is a global defense for freedom. So I think there's a question.
So the question is about midterms. The Democrats use some pretty bold tactics, obvious ones, and they work pretty well if you look at the women vote and the minority vote. So given that it was obvious and expected, and they have the advantage of all those media, I mean, what are your lessons from that? Patriots lose a game, they take a lesson away. So what are your lessons from?
I don't think either of us considered midterms to be a loss if you look at the traditional arc.
It wasn't that. I'm just saying, but those votes didn't, they tipped a lot of House races pretty bad.
You guys, the aesthetics of the room. But I just want to direct your attention to this dude, the Asian dude. Remember I told you Asians are white? And that the only non-whites in the room are two servants and Candace? There are Asians sitting in the room on this agenda. I'm telling y'all. See, this is where everything just ties in together. And this is not me tying it in together. This is like reality tying it in together for us.
Right. So I think a major problem that we have, and I always critique the Republican Party for this, is that we just don't run good candidates. I mean, the problem is that here I am, and we hate socialism, obviously, but when we look at Andrew Gillum next to Ron DeSantis in Florida, and you watch them on stage debating, one of them is charismatic. We're dealing with a population that is largely uneducated. So they're voting on charisma. They're not voting on facts. They don't know what socialism is. They don't know what it did in the past. They don't know what it's doing currently in Venezuela. And that's problematic, is that we're not running strong candidates. So a large portion of what we're doing in 2019 and 2020 is trying to put forth candidates that the RNC can run that are conservative. We should have more minorities running. There's no reason why John James didn't win in Michigan. And a lot of it's because the RNC is not putting enough money behind strong candidates like that. So there's a lot of bureaucratic, messes in terms of the Republican Party. But look, there was some optimistic things that happened for sure. Ron DeSantis did great.
Yes, she did say that Europe and the U.S. needed to unite and fight the enemy. They're also going to name some other European countries that they want to expand to and get this message off to. So they're very organized. I'm telling you, it gets more shocking as this goes on. Trust me.
Black women. Do you want to know why? He focused on school choice. That's an issue that matters. And that's what I try to get them to understand. Engaging the minority community is the way to win. There's not a single group of individuals that have been more lied to, more used, and more abused by leftist policies in the Black community. Their awakening is the end. It's the end for the left.
First of all, what happened with Kanye West? That one's aimed at Candace. And second of all, the left use very emotive arguments. They say, oh, we're poor and you're rich and we have to take away your money. Whereas I say, I work in a sort of free market think tank, oh, we've got to lower taxes to make the economy more efficient. Those two arguments are on two different levels, if you see what I mean. So how do we make our arguments more emotive and more, connect to young people's values, especially in the UK, where almost all young people, it seems, are sort of indoctrinated by Corbyn because he's so emotive and he brings it down to a very human level. Whereas
Wait, okay, so listen to what he's saying. He brings it down to a very human level. We're whitesplaining, right? The problem is that there are a group, because mind you, don't forget who put on this meeting. All these people are freaking rich as hell. They're lords, they're multimillionaires, billionaires. These are rich people in this room. We saw that at the beginning when they talked about who put it on. Poor people just want to take rich people's money. And the problem is the poor whites are the problem. This is why they like Donald Trump. Our news tries to make it sound like nobody likes Donald Trump. No, these white people love him because he's able to mobilize poor whites, right? And they're hoping that Candace will mobilize their children. We're half devil, half child, right? They're there to take care of us. Paternalism is the care for the lower castes of people, basically Black people. So he's saying, they're all human with it and appealing to emotion and all this isn't fair. These people have way too much money. How do we trick them by using emotions? He said emotive, but by using emotions to get them to sympathize with our ultra wealthy cause, because these people are rich as hell. How do we get them to go along with us, the people with more money than they can ever dream to have? It's an interesting question, but they have an answer. Don't worry.
I make is very economic and sort of a bit more, high values kind of thing.
I'll answer the Kanye part and then you want to answer? Sure. So for those of you that don't know, a major reason why we have so many wins this year is because Kanye West found my YouTube videos and tweeted that he loved the way that I thought. And that popped a very necessary bubble, the Hollywood bubble. People in Hollywood are not allowed to be conservative and they pitch these sort of leftist ideas that make no sense because they don't really know much about politics at all. They just want to think that they care about the little guy and don't realize that they're actually harming them. So when Kanye tweeted this, it obviously caused a mass firestorm. We went out, we met with him, and he is a conservative. There's no question about that. And we spent a lot of time with him I personally spent a ton of time with him working on sort of moving the ball forward, especially in the Black community. So in terms of what happened to him when he backed out of politics and says that he feels like he's been used, and I want to be careful with my words here, Kanye learned that you cannot do politics halfway. You can't.
So they're asking about Kanye because Kanye's was a great loss to them because they thought they were going to use him to get to us. And then Kanye said, I feel like I've been used. Like, he's more a middleist. He's not a Republican. He thought he could get something done for the Black community, but he's delusional because the way he was going about it was pandering to white people that don't care about him. They care about Blacks like Candace, who will come in and debase themselves and debase their whole community before they go into telling how white people are right about everything. And Kanye learned that. And this was a loss to them because they had expected to be able to use him to infiltrate the Black community. Because if we remember what Margaret Sanger said and what we saw in the video yesterday, they count on Black faces for infiltration. They count on training Black people with the white narrative so that they can infiltrate us because we trust each other. The skin gets past our first barrier, right? Isn't that the first barrier? The first thing you look at is somebody, oh, they're not Black. And then there's a guard up. But we let that first layer of guard down when we see a Black person. Candace is a great Black person too, because she's not mixed or anything. She's Black, she's pretty, she's young. It's a great way to break that down. Kanye would have been a great victory for them too. And he has a white wife, which would have been excellent. A white liberal wife. It would have been excellent for them because Kim has a lot of power. If they could have reeled in that Black man the way they really wanted to, it would have been a great win. That's why they care what happened there. They're like, what happened? That was supposed to be a tool, right? He was supposed to be one of our tools. Now we can't use him. He won't play. It's interesting they're asking her, the Black person, how she didn't manage to keep and capture that Black man for them.
One foot into politics and think it works that way. He has a family, he has a fashion brand, and you're either all in or you're all out. So Kanye he did what he did. He served us in a capacity that we're extremely grateful for, but we also want to respect the fact that he needed an out, and we gave it to him. I mean, that's really the most I can really say about that.
So he's still on side then?
Pardon?
Is he still on side? Is he still on your side?
Oh, yeah. Kanye's not a liberal. I mean, Kim talks about that all the time. So they have totally different political beliefs. So
to your second point, one of the rules that is, we as conservatives try to be noble in the way we fight in politics, and to some extent we should be. And for those of you that have seen Candace and myself, we'll be screamed at, things thrown at us. We never retaliate in kind. But one of the things the left does very, very well, and I follow Jeremy Corbyn because it's almost like a manifestation of our U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. It's as if they're the exact same person, constantly wrong but never in doubt, is they mercilessly attack our motives. Think about that. It's not that our policies don't work, it's that we don't care, and that conservatives want to put forth these policies so that they can enrich themselves and that they want to exploit people. And for whatever reason, we are very hesitant to attack the motivations of the left. And that's where Candace and I have had a tremendous amount of success, is on fact and on logic, is we have to go after the Jeremy Corbyns as exploiting poor people for political power. And that resonates because they are the wardens of millions and millions of people that are impoverished, to give them just enough to get by, but not enough opportunity to break out of poverty, because they want to continue to exploit as many poor people as possible to stay in political power. This happens all across the world. This is not a uniquely UK concept. In the States, we have the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party has done this with minority communities and Native American communities.
This sounds all good, but I want to just double back to the book that we read. Here's the idea. The idea is that the Black people can be useful to white people. We can drive their cars, we can clean their toilets, we can serve their food, we can trim, cut their lawns. We have jobs, right? Remember, he covered this in the book. The problem was with the excelling, right? So when we are not in subservience to whites, we end up hungry, without jobs, without the things that we need, because the proper order is not established. Because remember, we have to remember the framing of this meaning is the maintenance of the status quo and paternalism throughout all white nations, all Western nations, not just the United States, right? They're trying to spread this not just to the UK, but they're going to talk about outside of the UK as well, and recruiting. And so what they're talking about now is how they can get other non-whites on board. So I'm not a liberal, right? I give two craps about the liberals, but they're saying that the strategy is that, and this is how stupid they think we are. I'm not a liberal, but I'm not a Republican, right? I'm not ready to cook a white person's meal for them, right? But I'm also not ready to rip off my shirt and go braless and call myself she, zim, zer. Do you know what I'm saying? They're acting like there's no way that Black people could just hop in the middle of this thing and be like, fuck you, white master, or what did he call himself yesterday? The white great father, the great white father. Okay, fuck you, great white father, paternalism. And screw you, weirdos off on the side of the street, chopping off your penises and, trying to make it like illegals are, just equal to us. Like, we couldn't fall in the middle. They honestly believe, and this could be where our power lies, that the power struggle is just between radical leftist people who just want to treat us all like actual babies and them who want to treat us like their children and allow us to do all the menial tasks for them. And then we'll never go hungry as long as we know our place. And that is what we read in that book too, right? Because the thing is that the alternative, which is that we rise up and we choose to take their place, remember what we read earlier is that they will kill us all. We will suffer the fate of so many Native peoples, which is just to be obliterated. So just to look into the depth of this conversation, and what's really the conversation that's really being had here is, can we salvage paternalism? And they're going to say that later. Can we maintain the status quo? That's all that they care about in this meeting. What can we do to stop this downward spiral? Because believe it or not, white people feel an obligation to us to care for us the way that you would care for a baby, the way that you would care for somebody helpless, the way you would care for a child. What did the man call us? Half demon, half child. What did Cecil Cook say about the natives? It was paternalism by public necessity. This is their belief. The rich white elite, this is what they truly believe. And so understand the framing of this conversation and the topic that's really at hand here.
For the last 60 years. And so you have to go straight to, the next generation and say, Jeremy Corbyn says he cares for poor people, but he himself cares only as long as he gets to maintain political power. If poor people became rich and self-reliant and everybody's wealth increased, maybe they won't be members of the Labour Party anymore, and his power would diminish tremendously. That's the motivation that drives the left. The left, their entire livelihood is built around government apparatus, bureaucrats, laws, regulations. As conservatives, our livelihood is built around family, community, church, fraternity, business, and free enterprise. But for the left, everything they do is to try to grow the power of the state so they themselves can be the philosopher king ruling class. And you have to go after that and not just say we have better ideas, but that they don't actually care about the people they say they care about.
And really quickly, I'll add to that is that I think has been the differentiator for Turning Point, is that we understand that this war we're fighting is not political, it's cultural. This is a culture war. So a lot of people really stuck up their noses within our own party when we initially flew out to go meet Kanye West. Our hashtag for Turning Point USA is Big Gov Sucks. Like,
I think it's interesting she called it a culture war. I don't watch award shows, but I watched Cynthia G, and I know Nyla had a live regarding an award show that just happened. I can't think of the name of it right now, where it's a culture war, right? And what did they do during the award show? They took a historically Black record label that was created for Blacks by Blacks with all Black artists. And during this culture war that we're in, right, they replaced all the Black people with Hispanic people. And they also only featured, right? I think it was Alicia Keys and what was the other dude? You guys would know. I don't know because I didn't watch it. But weren't both of them racially ambiguous or not even fully Black? So it's interesting that this is the dialogue that's happening here, right? Because we have to recognize money rolls with money. And the money of America has sent them there to talk to the money of Europe about how to get this thing right. So these things are not coincidences.
proper. Why would you say Big Gov sucks? Well, one, because it does. And two, because when you put Big Gov sucks on a t-shirt, suddenly the movement becomes cooler and kids are more interested in it. There's a vibe going on these campuses and these chapters that we started that it's very punk rock. You're not allowed to be conservative. Oh, that definitely makes kids want to be conservative, right? Because they're young and it's a youth movement. So understanding culture and how culture works and not sticking your nose up to it is really important. And I think that we do too much of that as conservatives.
One more thing. And so the new paradigm that's going to be created in Western politics is not even conservative versus liberal. It's going to be the ruling class versus the disaffected. And so where Trump succeeded where people thought he couldn't is he brought people out that hadn't voted in 40 years that were disaffected in rural America. And culturally. Right. And so the essence of what conservatism is to fight for the rights of all people, especially the disaffected, and to cheer for their livelihood to increase. And the ruling class, if it will, is very corporatist, is to give the laws, the regulations, and the favor to those that are well connected politically. And the fundamental question that we always ask a socialist this: do you trust the government? Now in America, most people say no. I don't know what the answer would be here, but in America, it's almost built into our fabric, the distrust of government. That's great. We are inherently skeptical of power. And so almost every young American will say, I hate government. And you ask the next question, then why do you want to make that government bigger? And at that moment, they'll say, well, I don't. Well, then you're more conservative or libertarian than you ever thought you could possibly be. So. Next question.
I just wanted to sound a sort of rare positive note in these type of meetings and remind everyone that cultural Marxism was a response to Marxism's failure in the West, not its success. So the originator of cultural Marxism, George Lukács, if you take it starting from there, it was about the fact that Western populations did not rise in revolt and in revolution as Russian populations did. What that's done is put Western Marxism on a totally different path to Eastern Marxism. You don't get the social radicalism around race, gender, sexuality in East European communist countries. Of course you don't, you know, it's obvious. So that's why the East looks so different from the West. It's this strange inversion we've had. They've now swung to social conservatism, whereas we now have the long tail, if you like, of this Western Marxist program. So I suppose my question is twofold. One, could you comment on cultural Marxism as a sign of the left's failure or its success? And secondly, how do you square the circle with the fact that social conservatism is now associated with authoritarianism in Eastern Europe? And how do we deal with that in terms of our messaging? Because it's such obvious, rich ammunition.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your point, but the cultural Marxist piece, just so everyone understands where it stemmed from, is, yeah, it's rooted in postmodernism, which is an idea that's out of French philosophy. All bad ideas come from France. It's just like, without a shadow of a doubt. It's just nothing of value have they written in the last 100 years. It's just really a mess. And so is by Jacques Derrida, and is essentially has crumbled, you know, the American university, one singular idea. But the Marxists realized, this is just a short overview that for those that don't know, so the original Marxist doctrine was very economic in nature. Bourgeoisie versus the proletariat, so on and so forth. It was economic. And as the 60s and 70s rolled around, the Marxists realized they were losing the economic argument, because neoliberal free trade and free market capitalism was just such a wealth creating engine for all people that it's very hard for them to continue to convince people. So they went to cultural Marxism, which was actually written by some Italian philosophers back in the 20s and 30s, where they made the idea that we have to have our own cultural identity as Marxists. Essentially, there is no such thing as absolute truth. That's where you get this nonsense about there's unlimited genders, that the Judeo-Christian construct doesn't matter, it's atheist in nature, all those things. And so it has now seeped into most of the Western world, where you get a generation that essentially does not believe in any sort of responsibility and unlimited, quote unquote, social freedom. And that is why you have such unhappiness amongst young people in the West. But the final point is this, is that the Marxists rebranded
unlimited social freedom, because that's a bad thing, right? Being free. Unlimited social freedom is essentially being free without, remember, we're framing this under paternalism. Under the paternalistic system, there's no such thing as social freedom. There's freedom within the confines of what the Great White Father, their term, not my term, they called themselves the Great White Father, okay? What the Great White Father does in the allowance of their political service, again, their words, not mine. That's why all of these videos are tying together to bring us to this point of white people uniting to maintain the system. So there is no unlimited social freedom in a system of paternalism where there's a Great White Father. And that would be the status quo, the current status quo.
And they want to say, well, we're very tolerant. Well, they're actually the most intolerant people in the world. The leftists that preach tolerance are the most intolerant people in the world. They don't allow us on many college campuses in some parts of the states because they consider us to be, hate speech and too radical, because the left is afraid of other ideas.
And they also know that if we're allowed in the rooms, our ideas just make sense. And they want to prevent that from happening, from people being in the room with us and realizing it just makes sense. So we get a lot of times, particularly a moment that I always think of is UCLA. I think that was probably the craziest college. Yeah, University of California, Los Angeles was probably the craziest university stop that we had. And so we arrived there, and we've got Black Lives Matter protesters. We've got Antifa. We've got a group that I can't really identify that's screaming like no Nazi, no KKK, no fascist USA. And we've got people outside of the door that are playing Beyonce music, trying to drown out the sound so we can't talk. Now, of course, we get through it. It was really hard to stay calm and rational, but we get through it. And by the end of it, people came up and were like, it wasn't what I was expecting. Well, it's because what they Google And the Guardian pops up and it says that we're Nazi sympathizers and that we're literally Hitler and that Charlie's a racist. And so they come in with that energy because they've fed into the propaganda. And then, of course, if they sit and they stay, well, what am I saying? Black people don't have to be Democrats. I believe in you. You can do it without government handouts. We can do better for ourselves. We need to become more educated about politics. Well, that's not crazy at all. So the only way that they can win the argument is to shut free speech down, to make sure that we never make it to the universities so that people don't start to think logically.
It's interesting. You can do it without government handouts, because note what paternalism looks like, right? Paternalism looks like the Old South. The government stays out of the great white father's way, or the government does the great white father's bidding. Paternalism looks like what they did to the Aborigines in Australia. Paternalism looks like, now they took care of them. They didn't get government handouts. They just took their children and put them in institutions and on tribal land, right? When they went to Africa and started taking over, they just shoved them over to one corner of the city and they gave them all jobs cleaning their kitchens. When it was paternalism and the status quo and no social services in America, we were all slaves or indentured servants, right? Either or, because first was indentured servitude, then was slavery, then was indentured servitude again. Now we're in a form of modern indentured servitude. So the ideal situation would be that Black people have nowhere to turn but to paternalism. That would be the ideal situation. Note that there's no freedom or framing for the allowance of a situation where we take them over, right? And they just have, their time is just up at the top of the totem pole. That part is not in the discussion. And all of these things that we've covered in the past weeks, note that from Uncle Tom's Cabin to this meeting, the one thing that is not being discussed is Black people running themselves. We're either with the liberal white handlers or the paternalistic white handlers. But there's no discussion of a real revolution. That's not what's being discussed. This is literally a power grab for who's going to own the Blackies. Will the liberals own the Blackies or will we? Yeah, you can.
Could you comment briefly on the idea of bastard capitalism, which is the large corporates have appropriated these cultural Marxist tools and messages, A, to dress themselves in sort of moral clothing, but B, to kind of reach consumers and in a way to fragment society down to the level of more perfect consumers. You know, we see this everywhere. Banks, Dove soap is absolutely coming down from the listed corporates.
Right. So this is essentially the corporatist cartel that is catering to the very kind of cultural identity that they want to create in society. And in essence, so there's a lot of different ways I can answer this. Here's the easiest way, is that the radicalism that you see on the universities is not just contained to the universities. It's now stemmed into corporate structure, into governance of business and finance and so on and so forth. And so we call it, the campus has now come to Congress, is what we call it in the United States, which is these horrifically bad ideas that are considered so radical and just so hard to even swallow are now becoming more and more mainstream because of the people that want to see the destruction of Western civilization.
I want to ask, I come from the completely different stratosphere. I'm an artist and musician. And I think that's the reason why I was pretty much invited here today, because most of my friends, colleagues are on that side of the field. And I know that that's the side of the field that you want to push over. And one of the things that, I think one of the biggest things that I've always had when I've moved from left to right or across or whatever, however I am, is the environment. And I always wonder whether, when I listen to conservatives in America, one of the big things is that they don't seem to address it head on. It's always not like it's not addressed, but it's kind of like, for many people who are caring about the planet, they care about all these
I'm
things.
the stereotype that you're talking about. Like when people ask about the environment, I'm like, next question, I don't really care about it. The greatest reason for that is
And this is what I mean by she's turned a whole freaking lot. Because when she first came out, before she had a white handler, She didn't know how she felt about abortion. She didn't know how she felt about it. Now she knows everything. All of her talking points are their talking points. I mean, if it wasn't enough that she spent the first 5 minutes of this, for those of you who didn't see it, it's epic. You need to go back and watch it. She spent the first 5 minutes debasing herself, uplifting her white handler, and then putting her family down, and then the whole Black community. That was like the whole intro into who she was as a person. I am not as great as he is. My family is trash. My mom and dad did everything wrong. This was wrong with them. That was wrong with them. The whole Black community. Like, she just put everybody down, including herself and her own bloodline. So this woman she's close to insane, but she's about to, in about 5 minutes here, make her Hitler comment, which the clip has been spread far and wide throughout the net. But the foolery in this whole Q&A session is actually pretty ridiculous.
In French right now. Okay, so because at the end of the day, when you start putting those issues first, those social issues first, and you say we need an answer on the environment, no, we need an answer on the economy. Okay, that is so far down the line in terms of what people are going to care about. So France, he hikes the gas prices up to, what was it, 10.18 per gallon because he wanted to help for the environment. And what happened? What's happening in France right now? That's not going to be on a list of 10 things that a family cares about before they're going to revolt. I promise you the environment's not going to be there. But it is an issue that the left has seized, and they've blown it completely out of proportion in terms of talking about, the Paris Agreement, which is an absolute disaster. I mean, I'm so happy. It was one of the big wins was Trump pulling out of that, which was just extracting dollars from us. And there was actually nothing that they could do to fix the problem whatsoever. There was nothing proposed. It was just an idea, a feeling they were selling, that if we all band together and tax our citizens, we'll fix the environment. So I almost feel that the environmental issue has become a mechanism for the government to grow and to keep people emotional.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I was just wondering whether, imagine if you're a college kid, you're 19, 20 years old, you're smoking dope. You ask somebody, what do they care about? They care about the environment. It's one of those things that it is the first thing. And I'm just wondering about how do you emotionally connect to these people, because you can say something logical to them, but something like that never disappears from them. And I'm just wondering whether if conservatives came in with another angle.
Sure. I mean, so there's three.
And offered like a solution for the Paris Accord, for example.
Well, yeah. So first of all, the number one polluter in the world is the U.S. federal.
Okay, so Sharia, keep in mind, they don't care about the environment. That we have to stay focused on the conversation, right? The framing of this conversation is the maintaining of status quo and paternalism. They are specifically in Europe. This is being put on, for those of you who weren't in the beginning, this meeting is a private meeting that only 10 people were supposed to attend. It grew to about 35 people of white descent, Asian whites and white whites, right? All white people. And they're sitting here and they're talking about how they're going to spread this agenda into the UK. And then they're in a little bit going to talk about the other white countries they want to spread the agenda of maintenance of the status quo of paternalism to. Now, in their eyes, and I've said this, but I just want us to remember this as they're talking, there are two ways, two groups of people who are going to control Black people, right? It's going to be the liberal people, or it's going to be the good old boys, the ones that believe in paternalism and the maintenance of the status quo. They're fighting over their subjects, right? They're fighting over Black people, the control over the non-whites. That's all that this conversation is about. They're saying the other owners want to keep Black people because they're going to appeal to them being in poverty. We're going to take care of you. You can kind of be our babies. We care about the trees. And he's like, well, what strategy can we come up with to combat that? What can we say to pull on their emotional heartstrings so that they'll listen to us? Maybe it's not the best idea to take a hard line. Maybe we can come up with some solutions so that they feel that we actually give two craps about what they think. That's what he's saying. Okay, so let's be clear. Nobody actually cares about the environment, us or anything. They're just talking about, like, there's a pool of people they want to control. What are the strategies? This is like a think tank, right? What are the strategies we can use to control them? Be understanding of the fact that Candace and her white handler are there to talk about how they have used Candace to infiltrate Black people and pull them over to the paternalistic side of things. That's the purpose of this meeting. So all of these questions we have to recognize are being framed under that purpose. The goal of the meeting is to maintain power over non-whites through paternalism and the status quo that has traditionally been used through the arm of colonialism, versus this new school of thought where the white liberals, who are also racist, control us through creating a perpetual straw man of scary racist white people, even though they're also the racists, right? The liberals are racist as hell too. And then they control the same agenda, both sides. Now, this is what's weird. Paternalistic whites want to keep us like children, and they'll only kill us if we won't do what they want us to do. The liberal whites want to treat us like children, but they will actively commit genocide as they're doing it. See, paternalistic whites only want to kill you if you just try to be equal with them. Then they're going to slaughter you. It's game over. Liberal whites, they are going to kill you where you stand, because they don't like you at all. So they're going to pump you full of immunizations. They're going to put abortion clinics, in your thing. They're going to replace you with illegals. They're going to do everything they can to tear apart your blackness. Whereas paternalistic whites are like, if we just keep them like children and they can drive our cars and clean our toilets, and then, there's no problem. We don't have an issue. It's the old school racism versus the new school racism. Now, obviously, we need to fall on neither side, right? We're not going to swing to the conservative side. We're not going to swing to the liberal side. They're both trash. But understand that this conversation's not about us. This conversation is a struggle over different types of white people who want control over non-whites. That's all it's about. And everything that they're talking about is in the framework of how do we get the control that they have? Because remember what we read in that book. Paternalistic whites don't want to kill us unless you make them. They will kill you, but they don't want to do it if they can use you for service. They will keep you around. Whereas liberal whites, they just want to massacre you. That's their goal, just straight out. They really don't have a use for you at all.
So if you want to stop pollution, curb back the size of government. That will really make socialist Marxists' heads explode. The second thing is the number one oil spill in the States over the last 15 years is actually done by the very agency that was supposed to protect us. It was done by the Environmental Protection Agency in the Colorado River that had millions of metric tons of pollutants put into the Colorado River, and no one was held accountable. No one was fired. You guys remember what happened when BP had 1/10 of the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico? Lawsuits, out the window. International crisis. When a government pollutes its own citizens, no one is held accountable. The third thing is that the irrational war on fossil fuels from the American left and the international left hurts poor people the most, because it's the elites that can afford rising utility rates. It's the elites that really don't look at the pump when they're filling up, their gas, with another liter of gas. America is now energy independent. For the first time in American history, America is now exporting more oil and liquefied natural gas than ever. The left under Obama, he did everything he possibly could to stop exploration. The three most, if you rank fossil fuels, the cleanest is liquefied natural gas. And we're getting even better as far as the carbon emissions for that. The United States is like 2 times Saudi Arabia of natural gas. The left wants to keep it all in the ground. It's in the plank and the platform of Jeremy Corbyn. It's in the plank and the platform of Bernie Sanders. And because, with Candace's point, they want to use this radical.
And so again, this is interesting. We hear these political talking points on mainstream media all the time. But understand that there are 2 groups of white people fighting over power. One group wants to do it one way, another group wants to do it another way. And so everything that we see, all these talking points about welfare, it's either welfare or subservience to them. It's either dig up all the oil or move to renewable energy. But this isn't about you or me or Black people. This is about 2 separate groups of white people who like to do things 2 different ways, the paternalists versus the liberal whites. But understand that in both of their mindsets, While they are battling each other, we are just pawns. We're just collateral damage in this. It's interesting to hear them have these conversations because white people care about resources. They care about access to land, oil, human beings. Remember, in this country, we have a department called the Office of Human Capital. You know, capital is money. Human capital. The Office of Human Capital runs this whole country. It runs your schools, it runs your parks, it runs your social services. It runs your food subsidy programs. It's who kicks out money to farmers so that they can continue to grow crops. The Office of Human Capital. So these white people are in a fight for resources, including human resources. You and I being that human resource as non-whites. And so I don't want us to get confused when we hear these talking points because we're so indoctrinated by how this rhetoric is presented to us in major media as to what's really being discussed here. These are a room full of wealthy white people talking to a Black infiltrator and her handler about how they can turn over who, you know, these non-whites that they feel so paternalistic to their cause so they don't have to kill us all and they can still use us as they also grab the natural resources on multiple continents. Because this agenda, as those of you who were here earlier heard, that they were unifying the United States and the UK. But they go on to name other countries that they're bringing on board, other white countries that they're bringing on board because they have sympathizers worldwide. So this fight isn't about the topics that they're bringing out. The topics that they're bringing out are just the resources that they want to acquire. They're part of their agenda. They're the things they want control over. But the framework is which white master is going to win. And how do we get our subjects? Because that's the new face of slavery, right? Is that you get the people to believe that they've chosen your way. This is easier than mass bloodshed because white people aren't going to just start killing each other. They stopped doing that once they got into colonialization, right? So we have the facade of choice. So they're framing these things as to this is what we want. How do we frame these things so that they're palatable to the people that we own? This is the conversation that's being had.
Religious component of environmentalism, it's almost become a religion to go against free enterprise and to go after free market capitalism. And if you actually care about the development of the third world, you should try to build as many coal-fired power plants as you possibly can. They cannot build them fast enough in Indonesia and Singapore and in Cambodia and Laos and India, because when you have a power plant, you have a hospital, you have a school, you have a mechanism to bring people out of absolute poverty, and quick and access to fossil fuels allows to do that. And then the final point is this, is that outside of the Paris Climate Accord, the United States is now independently, we're now at the lowest carbon emissions that we've been in the last 40 years, outside of the Paris Climate Accord, because of innovation and free enterprise advancement.
That's what I was going to say. Innovation and free enterprise is the solution. Investing in young scientists and people that have new ideas about how to conquer the environment, not investing in government. There's not a single government program that runs efficiently. Not a single one. When I ask people, name one that you think runs really well, they're silent because they're all terrible. It's just a means to extract dollars. So if we want to start looking for viable solutions, we have to start looking at innovative free market capitalist ideas and turning to people that have an interest in science and the environment to have them come up with solutions.
Yeah, so in the current age, I feel like the political debate stems around nationalism and globalism, which, however, they're weaponized within the media. I feel especially in Europe, and I like in America, these movements are being energized. Do you feel the momentum will last? In regards to the EU, Guy Verhofstadt referred to his base of the movement as the summer of populism in quotation marks. But 2 years down the line, these governments are realizing there's a clear trajectory in the opposite, like against the status quo.
There's that word. We're going to rewind it. I want you guys to listen to his comment really well. And note that this is not his question. Some of these people are there for rich people. Have you ever, I don't know if any of you guys have ever been to an auction, like an auction for wealthy people. Sometimes the people don't come themselves. Sometimes they send people to come in their place. So please note that he's referencing his phone, and he's actually referencing something on his phone. That is the question that he's asking. So I want to back up his question. Notice he said the maintenance of the status quo. And he was speaking of nationalism, et cetera, et cetera. But before I back up of that, I just want to, somebody made a comment that we can't underestimate white people. They will commit genocide. And my response was, they are committing genocide of Black people globally. Globally. Almost all the Black people in India, the indigenous, almost all the Black people in India have been killed. Almost all the Black people in Australia have been killed. Almost all the Black people in South America have been killed. Almost all the Black people in those colonialized places have been murdered. There are almost none of them left. That's a conversation I'm going to be having, I think, Friday, when I talk about Blacks throughout the diaspora. Not just of Afro descent, because there are Black people who are not of Afro descent, but they are as Black as you, Blacker than you or I. And they are treated equally evilly. And they are killed, and they have effectively wiped them out off of most of the planet. Now they're working on Africa, and if we make them, they will take us out here in the United States. Keep in mind, we commit genocide for them. We have Black on Black violence at the hand and to the benefit of white supremacy. That's why I said that book, Black on Black Violence and the Psychodynamics of Self-Annihilation in the Service of White Supremacy, is a book that we all need to read. In the service of white supremacy. And when we add to that abortion, they are committing genocide all over the place. They have killed most of the Black people on the planet already. That's what we don't realize. This is a done deal. They've been all over the planet murdering most of the Black people anyway. This isn't new business for them. But we'll talk about that on Friday. We're not going to get into that here, but I just wanted to be very clear on that. We don't have to underestimate them. They're already doing the work. But I want to back up his question a little bit. Like I said, he's over here referencing his phone and such and such and so and so. But listen carefully to his question, which ends with the maintenance of the status quo. The status quo for whites and non-whites has always been paternalistic in nature, which is why we did that on paternalism yesterday. And we read that book written and published in American Medical Journal here.
Because of innovation and free enterprise advancement.
That's what I was going to say. Innovation and free enterprise is the solution. Investing in young scientists and people that have new ideas about how to conquer the environment, not investing in government. There's not a single government program that runs efficiently. Not a single one. That when I ask people, name one that you think runs really well, they're silent because they're all terrible. It's just a means to extract dollars. So if we want to start looking for viable solutions, we have to start looking at innovative free market capitalist ideas and turning to people that have an interest in science and the environment to have them come up with solutions.
Yeah, so in the current age, I feel like the political debate stems around nationalism and globalism, which, however, they're weaponized within the media. I feel especially in Europe and in America, these movements are being energized. Do you feel the momentum will last? In regards to the EU, Guy Verhofstadt referred to his base of the movement as the summer of populism in quotation marks. But 2 years down the line, these governments are realizing there's a clear trajectory in the opposite, like the status against the status quo. How do you feel like the long-term prognosis is for these particular movements?
Well, at least the American media is doing everything they can to poison the term nationalism. Just like any idea, there's good nationalism and bad nationalism. If your nationalism is rooted on very good ideas and defense of common law and free enterprise, then yeah, sign me up for a nationalist for the UK or the United States. The idea of a nation state is so fundamental to a functioning society. Never forget that there has been the creation of trying to assimilate nations by force has led more mass casualty than almost any other global elitist trend over the last 100 years, whether it be post-World War I structuring that led to World War II, whether it be the Soviet bloc or the colonization of certain African nations. The idea that the elites can put forth arbitrary borders in Iraq, for example, which led to the complete and total arbitrary segregation of the Kurds, the Shias, and the Sunnis, will lead to more casualty than the protection of independently created national sovereignty, of which
The elites, as he called them. He's a trip, but Candace is about to make her Hitler comment, so that y'all know it wasn't taken out of context, because that's how they're trying to spin it. But we know Candace has been doing her whole tap dance she started out by putting herself, her family, and all Black people down. So we know this Hitler comment was not taken out of context whatsoever, and she's about to make that comment now.
Very big proponents, obviously, of. Now, the globalists don't believe that. They look at the EU. They're doing everything they can to erode national identity, to unify the currency, to destroy any sort of independent language or linguistic capacity to communicate. And this should be a huge fear to any of us that believe in freedom, because as soon as they can control 9 different nations, they will impose absolute statism independently, quickly, and dramatically. And that's why we were so enthused by Brexit, but now a little worried that the elites are doing everything they can to thwart the will of the common man of Britain.
Yeah, I agree. I actually don't have any problems at all with the word nationalism. I think that it gets, the definition gets poisoned by elitists that actually want globalism. Globalism is what I don't want. So when you think about, whenever we say nationalism, the first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. He was a National Socialist, but if Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is that he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German, everybody to be speaking German, everybody to look a different way. That's not, to me, that's not nationalism. So in thinking about how it could go bad down the line, I don't really have an issue with nationalism. I really don't. I think that it's okay. It's important to retain your country's identity and to make sure that what's happening here, which I think is incredibly worrisome in terms of the decrease in the birth rate that we're seeing in the UK, is what you kind of want to avoid. So I don't have anything problem. I have no problems with nationalism. It's globalism that I try to avoid.
Okay, so clearly I'm not even going to touch the Hitler comment because everybody's touched it. Candace has got her full tap dancing shoes on, and now she's going to go into a full like spinning, leaping off the rooftops. I mean, she's opened it up now, right? This is the second time she's brought up Hitler in 40 minutes. And now she's about to move into her extra level of stupidity because she got away with that comment. Because remember, this one, we're watching the whole Q&A session, but this one comment got out because whoever was recording this wasn't a public meeting. This was a private meeting between rich white people who brought them there to work on the agenda and the approach that they were going to use to indoctrinate non-whites in the UK.
Yeah, my question is on how you touched upon the idea of campuses and the growth of the left-wing movement on campuses.
Oh, what's up? There goes the other Black person. Okay, remember I told you there were two other non-white people in this whole room, but they were serving? There he goes. The other one's around there somewhere. Why does this woman over in the corner with like the hat on look like our first lady? Doesn't she though?
And I think how that's now come sort of a movement, especially with Jeremy Corbyn's growth in the UK. The university I'm at in London, the LSE, is very much at a tipping point, as it were, between a movement towards conservatism and a movement towards left-wing ideals. And more it seems to be that I've discovered that the left-wing ideals have been taking more of a priority and more of a standpoint. So with the fact that we have, as we touched upon before, the emotive leadership of somebody like Jeremy Corbyn on the left, what is the best way in which conservatism can start to take back a relevance in university campuses? And how does conservatism, especially in the UK, start to reconnect with a core base in which, in many cases, it's lost?
Culture, 100%. The left won the culture war. That's the problem. I don't obviously watch much TV, but I'm assuming everything on TV is leftist. And here, as it is in America, all the late night shows are leftist. They're mocking conservatives, and they've been able to sort of diminish what it means to be a conservative. People think conservatives are old, rich white men that want to return to the old order of America where there was slavery. I mean, and that's wrong. But because they've been able to yield culture for so long, they're able to brainwash people into believing this. It's so important that we fight the culture war. When I first got started on YouTube, a criticism that came towards me was that I was like a dumb girl. She's making 4-minute videos on YouTube, and she's making fun of people and laughing, but this is not, this isn't serious. That's not what conservatism is about. Why isn't she writing long form essays? Well, because kids aren't going to watch long form essays. They're going to watch they're watching YouTube videos in between classes. If you can make it funny and appealing, then they say,
listen, she's breaking down how they're going to steal our children's minds. So we need to listen up to this. They're going to steal our children's minds because they think we're freaking simple. They think we're simple-minded. They think we're simple-minded. We've been indoctrinated to like quick things, to like fast satisfaction, to like colorful stuff, to like catchphrases, to be simple-minded. Nobody wants to sit down and have, a logical conversation. Nobody wants to sit and read a whole book. Nobody wants to hear a lecture anymore. That's not the spirit of the age. And so right now she's saying the reason paternalism has failed is because you guys want to be stuffy. But you have to be cool. If you're cool, then we can indoctrinate the minds of people. This is what she's sitting there telling them. Because remember that this whole meeting is because the paternalistic status quo is losing power to the new age white majority of liberalism. And they want to maintain their power, and they want to do this across the entire earth.
That's cool. That's what I want to do. And it has to be a youth movement. If you're going to protect the future of any country, it has to be a youth movement. We know what the youth likes to rebel, right? And right now, the thing to rebel against is this growing leftist ideology. So we always point to culture and try to remind people that politics is downstream from culture, which is something that Andrew Breitbart said.
And so to reinforce that, Candace and I will be going to the front lines of universities here in London and across the UK. And there will be retaliation, there'll be protest, but you will see that it takes individuals to go straight into the fire to spark a movement. And we've seen it in the States. We have hundreds of thousands and millions of followers now. Just to give you an idea of the scope of what we've been able to do, next week we're going to be in Palm Beach, Florida, and all of you are invited to this, by the way, by any long shot that you want to come to the US and actually see a grassroots youth movement. We're going to have well over 3,500, 4,000 students from all 50 states come down on their own dime to Palm Beach, Florida to receive the training and to get fired up and energized and the connection. But it's built around culture. It's built around challenging these very simple ideas that have seeped into the culture. And so we want to do that here in the UK. And a lot of it also is there is a silent majority of people that support your ideas, but because of what we call the fascist left, it becomes impossible for people to speak their mind. And so in the US, we joke around on US campuses, you cannot wear a.
He just said what I've been saying the whole time. He said there's a silent majority that supports your ideas. Now he's saying your ideas to the room full of people he's speaking to. And again, who is in that room? For those of you who weren't here in the beginning, if you go back to the beginning of this, it shows who funded this meeting. And it's a bunch of lords and ultra rich white people who are paternalistic in their mindset. And he's telling them that a lot of people think like them. They're just not speaking up. But if we do this in the right way, they'll start to speak up. And I say, let them speak. Let them speak. We need some honesty around here because, see, we're in a delusion. We seem to not realize that there's a fight going on between white people for control over us. And whilst they are fighting each other, we could be getting a lot of work done. And they will look up and have control over no one.
America Great Again hat without having some sort of physical retaliation done against you, just because they dominate the university so much.
Yes, and I'll just add, we've also been able to harness the power of social media, the new technology, and realizing that people love the tweets, being able to smack down a leftist on Twitter. They live for that. It makes them feel like we're winning and we're fighting, and because we have better ideas and we're not afraid to punch back. So I think that that's something that Charlie and I have done. So we repurpose the footage. We might be in a room with 400 kids on a university, but the reason why we have cameras and we say, if you have a disagreement, come to the front of a line, is because we're waiting for a leftist to come up and say, Charlie, you're a racist, and Candace, you're a Nazi. And because we repurpose that footage, we turn it into these 1-minute clips, and it goes viral, and it gets millions of views. So then who's watching that? The generation beneath that is watching that, and they say, do I want to be the girl with purple, pink, and yellow hair that was calling everybody a racist and looked like a big baby, or do I want to be the people that were poised on stage and able to debunk the arguments ideologically? So that's really what it's about.
I think it's highly laudable that you've come here to launch your movement in the UK. I have two questions for you. The first is, how can we in this room help you? And the second is, how much success do you think you're going to have in a country where it appears that the political establishment has come to view the people of this country as dependent on it, rather than as shareholders who actually own the state that they live in?
Wonderful question.
Yeah.
Y'all, did you catch his question? Wait, we got to listen to his question again. Because their questions are out of control. When you really listen to their questions, I know they're framed in the most calm, way possible. I know that their language is not the common vernacular of the day here in the States. But they talk crazy as hell, y'all. They say the craziest stuff. His question is ridiculous.
I think it's highly laudable that you've come here to launch your movement in the UK. I have two questions for you. The first is, how can we in this room help you? And the second is, how much success do you think you're going to have in a country where it appears that the political establishment has come to view the people of this country as dependent on it, rather than as shareholders who actually own the state that they live in?
Wonderful question.
Yeah.
Brilliantly said. So I'll start with how you can help. So we're in the next day, we'll have a very formalized plan of how we're going to go about.
And actually, I agree with that, but not for the purposes that they do. We do tend to view government as an authority over us instead of government as in service to us. That was essentially what his question was. How are we going to gain footage in a place where they don't even understand how their own country works? That's what he's saying. And I would agree. Most Americans think the police, the government, that they are in charge of us. And when that's not the way that it is. That's not how this country is set up. But that's how we all behave. We act like they have authority over us. The reality is that they are our servants. And if they don't do what we want them to do, we displace them. But that's a hard concept for us to grab. We displace servants who don't serve. And the minute we understand that, we can have a revolution in this country. The president is not our boss. He is our servant. The Congress are not our boss. Our governors are not our bosses. These people are our servants. They are to do what they are told. But they are doing what they are paid to do by rich people right now. And we are letting them do that, despite the fact that this is not how it's supposed to operate. Despite the fact that their only job is to do what they are told to do and nothing more. They are to cast votes in the way that we tell them to cast votes. They are to make the laws or dispense of the laws that we tell them to make or dispense. That is the only purpose that they have. Because you, me, and 1,000 other people, 1 million other people can't squeeze into a building. We send one individual to do what we tell them to do. And are they doing this? They are not doing this. So he brings up a good point, but I would bring up the same point in a different way. Why is it that we have servants? That is like I have someone scrubbing my toilets and washing my floors, and then they go and decide that they are going to paint the house. But fool, nobody told you to touch my house. I told you to scrub a toilet. So what do I do with that servant? I throw them out my house. Why is it that we have a hard time conceptualizing that with regard to our public servants? The people who are there and positioned to only do what they are told. Why are they running amok and we're all acting like there's nothing we can do about this? We have to ask. No, we don't ask servants to do shit. We don't ask them to do anything. And yet that is the attitude we have here in the States. Let's ask. Let's see if we beg. Maybe if we ask some more. Maybe if we walk down the street in a group, quote unquote, protest and ask. What the hell are we asking servants to do anything for? If I ask my servant to get me a glass of water and they don't walk their ass to the kitchen and pour some water in a cup, they quickly stop being my servant. Why is this something we cannot conceptualize on a bigger scale is what I want to know.
The implementation strategy, there's 3 or 4 youth activists here that we plan to meet with tomorrow, and to bring our proven methodology of campus organizing and activism here to the UK. And there's already some energy and some infrastructure and some great digital work that's already being done here. And with that, of course, we'll take resources and capital. We're not here to ask for money, but that will be needed at some point. And, you know, John and many people in this room have already volunteered to be points of contact there. Secondly, we want to hit this very quickly, when Candace and I want to come back in February and hit 3 to 4 universities here in the UK. And when we say we don't shy away from controversy, put us at Cambridge. You know, like, you know, right? We want to the most controversial, the most protests you can get, because we will highlight, isolate, and debunk the radicalism in 30 seconds or less. And that will spread viral quicker than you could possibly imagine. And you will have people from the countryside, from Scotland, Northern Ireland, come out of the woodwork wanting to start more chapters. And that's how it's really going to start. And what's the other thing? We Americans, we don't like to lose. Now, I know you guys might think, oh, Americans are cocky and all that. I'm going to tell you right now, we don't go about anything unless we believe we can succeed. And Candace and I, we have been very successful over the last 13 months, and we want to enter this with humility and to try to learn as much about the UK current political culture. But we're going to come after this with a orientation towards success and victory. And having done it for 6.5 years now, we know some of the traps and some of the pitfalls. But we also are here to learn from some of the cultural elements that we're not yet here to come and haven't seen yet. So Candace, you want to comment on that at all?
No, just totally agree with that we think we can do it. We're largely optimistic. So many people come up to us and they say, you guys are so brave. You're so brave. We're not brave. Brave was our boys who landed on the beaches of Normandy. They were brave.
Did this bitch say our boys who landed on the beaches of Normandy? Y'all, who landed on the beaches of Normandy? I just want to know. And when did they become our boys? She's very confused right now.
With odds completely against them, and they want a war, and that's what we're doing. We're here to fight a cultural war, and we feel that we can win.
My question has been, you've been talking about how you're going to integrate through the universities and colleges, but obviously this movement is way beyond just the student population of what I imagine you want to achieve. So Candace, for example, the community that you grew up in, what's your strategy to actually infiltrating your message amongst different cultures and different societies other than just the student population?
That's correct. So that's why I launched Blexit, which is a movement directly aimed at the Black community. And I have a tour this year, a Blexit tour, which I'll be on the
Okay, so you heard, she just admitted what she does. I want you guys to hear what she says she does. She is aimed like a rifle, a gun, a bullet at the Black community. Let's just back it up a couple seconds.
Who landed on the beaches of Normandy. They were brave. With odds completely against them, and they want to war.
Wait, look at the white people in the room. Did you see the faces they were making? He had to get them to clap. Did you see her handler like clap for her, y'all? We need her on her side. And then when they pan the room, those white people are looking like, you don't even know what the hell you're talking about right now. I am so serious.
That's what we're doing. We're here to fight a cultural war, and we feel that we can win.
My question has been, you've been talking about how you're going to integrate through the universities and colleges, but obviously this movement is way beyond just the student population of what I imagine you want to achieve. So Candace, for example, the community that you grew up in, what's your strategy to actually infiltrating your message amongst different cultures and different societies other than just the student population?
That's correct. So that's why I launched Blexit, which is a movement directly aimed at the Black community. And I have a tour this year, a Blexit tour, which I'll be on the HBCUs, which are historical Black colleges and universities, and in neighborhoods, like in the backyards of these politicians, having rallies with Black people that are just open to new ideas. Because what we've realized is that the Black community is extremely fatigued. They know something's not working. It's been 60 years of leftist policies. It's been 60 years of telling us that we should hate the rich, and somehow we're not getting richer by hating the rich. So realizing that these communities are.
So notice who the two opponents are. Because remember, she's in a room full of ultra wealthy white people. The opponent is Black people who have been taught to hate the rich. The goal is to convince Black people, because they're very fatigued, as she said. We're all tired. We've been stuck on this Democratic bandwagon for too long. I'm not a Democrat. I'm just saying a lot of our people are, though. So while they're fatigued and they don't know what to do, no, let's not join forces and look for our own liberation, right? That's not what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to send in a Black face to tell them, here's what you should do. This is how simple-minded white people seem to think we are. Fatigued Black people won't come up with something to do on their own. Oh no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to sit around and wait for white people to tell us what we should and shouldn't be doing. And what they're going to do is send in Candace, and she's going to tell us, come on over to this side. Rich people ain't so bad. Let's get back to paternalism, because we will take care of you. You guys are like our babies.
For new ideas and going into them is what my Blexit movement is about separately. I always say that Turning Point is one vertical of what I see as leading a Black exodus against the Democrat Party, which I believe that I can move it 20 points, the vote 20 points by 2020. Just so you guys understand, the left relies on the Black vote like you wouldn't believe. If they won 85% of the Black vote in 2020, they would lose. They have to win more than 85% of the Black vote.
Ooh, do you hear how powerful our vote is? Y'all, we have to start the Black Nationalist Party. Like, I'm going to keep saying this, like I'm nobody, but like if you guys repeat it together, we can start the Black Nationalist Party. How important is our vote? Our votes are so important. And the thing is that people think we're cool who are also so-called minorities, right? We start the Black Nationalist Party for us, but we can manipulate all these so-called minorities into voting for our candidate because they've been taught to align themselves with Blackness. They can't have any cause without including our struggle, because we are the bullet point list that you need to hop on and check off in order to say that your cause is valid. This is why we need the Black Nationalist Party. How about nobody get our vote? How about fuck you? How about this is our country? Any of these ideas, like pick one. I don't care. We could revolution has a lot of faces. Just pick a face, throw an R over our heads, and do this thing. Like, if we're not going to use coercive force, then we need to start getting pragmatic, right? We need to start getting pragmatic about how we handle things. And pick no white person's side. Pick our own side.
Every time, and they do. Hillary won 89%. So we're talking about swinging this 5 points. And like I said, when you speak to a community and you're from it, they listen more, and they're willing to listen. We're seeing that now. For those of you that don't know, despite calling him a racist, plausibly, 1,217 times a day, Black support for Donald Trump has doubled in the last year. So him producing results and us going into communities with a message separate from the universities, because the problem is that a lot of those minorities never even make it to university, is what my Blexit movement is all about.
And so one quick comment on this. The left in the UK and the US, but the UK especially, their two big entry points have been labor unions / bureaucracies, government service workers, and the universities. That's really where they build their legions and their activists. And so even if, and this is why the opposition to what we're going to do here is going to be fun. Because if anyone dares challenge their monopoly on the university students, that's a political threat to the Labour Party, like instantaneously. Like, oh my goodness, what if Charlie and Candace and Turning Point UK and all the amazing patriots in this room are able to win another 15,000 converts? That all of a sudden is a huge threat. And so that's where we find the most amount of interest. Because if you can win someone when they're young, when they're 19 or 20 into a conservative, they will be a conservative for life. And it's the great Winston Churchill, who, by the way, I say this a lot, he is the greatest man to live in the 20th century, without a shadow of a doubt. The greatest man to live in the 20th century. And he's totally misrepresented in a lot of culture and a lot of media. It said, if you're not liberal when you're young, you have no heart. And if you're not conservative when you're old, you have no brain. I'm sure you've all heard that many times. That's actually, we probably hear that at least once a week back in the States. And boy, does the UK need a Churchill right now, not a Neville Chamberlain.
And what the universities in particular really hate about me and Charlie, they're in a weird pickle now because of our celebrity. Everything we tweet becomes the news. So when Chicago wouldn't let us speak, where were we? DePaul University wouldn't let us speak. I sent one tweet about it and it became news. And suddenly the university had to answer for why they weren't letting us speak. And they were forced, everyone's paying attention. Why aren't you letting conservatives speak? Why aren't you letting them get their ideas out? So we are able.
Yeah, Candace's black face is their ace in the hole. It really is. Because, see, white men can't run around and have these conversations and get sympathy. They got the black woman to do it because she's a woman and she's black. And she's extra black, too. Candace is black, okay? For all intensive physical and biological purposes. Very, very black.
Apply a lot of pressure just by our social media presence. Everything that we tweet garners tens of thousands of views and instantly becomes a story. And they don't like that. They want to censor speech, but they want to do it privately. And they're not able to do that when there are big names coming on their universities and the press is showing up.
I don't know whether it's relevant, but Barack Obama, of course, had Churchill's bust removed, didn't he, from the Oval Office?
Yeah, so Barack Obama hated the idea of Winston Churchill. And he took his bust right out of the Oval Office. And day one, Donald Trump put it right back in. And Candace and I have seen it. And we smiled next to it and posed next to it. And
well, fancy that. It's great to see and hear you. You've talked a lot about the politics of power and debunking, and that makes good sense. If you like, it's the how. And
I like that term, the politics of power. See, they like to play games that we aren't playing. We need to embrace the politics of power. That's why I did that series. There's types of power. There are three main types of power. I did a video on it. I'm telling you, I'll go back and listen to it. There's a power where we unify under a certain purpose. There's power in that. And if you merge that with coercive force, right, then you get essentially what our society is built on. The other power is you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, right? These are types of force. You do what I say or I'm going to smash your face in. Coercive force, right? You do what I say or I'm going to throw you in jail. The politics of power, as this white man is saying. You do what I want, I'll do something you want, right? Kind of tit for tat. We all agree with each other that we want this common goal, so let's work together because together we can get more accomplished. This is what white people seem to understand. This is why the Brits really don't like Americans, but they have a common interest in maintaining paternalism and conservative white dominance. And so they are willing to have a black woman, even though they'll give two craps for black people, to do their bidding. And they're willing to bring over Americans to convert the minds of their youth if it will serve their purpose, because they understand that. As a people, we don't seem to understand that. We want to draw 15 million lines in the sand, left and right, between us. But see, white people, they don't move like that. They're not turning on each other. They're going to fight a civilized battle, and the only casualties will be non-whites.
About culture, but underpinning culture really is the human condition. And as a medic, which is what I am and was.
Look, Dwayne Bryant, one Black woman isn't representative of all Black women. Okay? And I think any conversations that are divisive among Black people are not useful conversations. You don't hear white men, Asian men, or any other men talking about the ills of their women. This is irrelevant in a conversation like this. Candace is one traitorous bitch. But we're not about to have a conversation about the collective of Black men, Black women, anything. The only thing collective that we're going to talk about in reference to Black men and Black women is how we're collectively going to check this problem. I hate when we're staring at a room full of white people with one Black person in it, acting a fool. What we won't do is turn into a conversation where it's suddenly a conversation of pitting one side of Blackness against another. That is our failure as a people, is that we will find a way to divide ourselves. The only person that we should be mad at in watching this commentary are white people. Candace is irrelevant. She showed her face. We know her name. We know not to let her into the freaking meeting. Right? But make no mistake, every Black man in Hollywood is a traitor, and every white manhandler that he has. Every Black woman in Hollywood is a traitor. There are Black men and Black females that work to actively promote this agenda on a mass scale everywhere. But that has nothing to do with the rest of us. Nothing at all.
I'm very interested in what makes people tick. And the thing that appeals to me is the grounding, if you like, of culture, and a successful culture in the psychology of people. We talked briefly beforehand about Jordan Peterson. I'm sure he's one of several psychologists who provided the science, perhaps, that underpins your inspiration. When you're going to universities, these bright young minds, I presume, will be pushing you for reasons and drilling down. What do you say to that? And is this something that you actually sort of depend on or try to push?
The answer is yes. And so if I had to boil it down even more than anything else, we have a behavioral psychology disagreement with the left. The left believes that with enough government force, they can get rid.
We have a behavioral psychology disagreement with the left. I would say that's a true statement, right? I would say, you know, one side wants to treat us like devil children, as long as we are in service and in submission to them, it's all good to go. The other side wants to make us feel that we're equal, while on the back end of things, they literally engage in genocide against us. I would say there is a behavioral psychological issue going on too. I don't know if it's going to be the same one he's going to try to propose, but that's the one I would propose.
Hierarchies. Okay, so what is a hierarchy? A hierarchy is that some people are going to be better at some things than other people. And so they believe that they can create an egalitarian utopia by righting the wrongs of the exploitative society. And that's what's inherent in Marxism, is that you must take from those that have it and give it to those that don't. Cultural Marxism is even worse, is that there's no difference between men and women. That's essentially what they teach now in many, many universities across the West. And science will tell you that is fundamentally not true. And what Jordan Peterson offers is a multi-million year analysis that, going back in the Darwinian, process of evolution, hierarchies are embedded in animals, going far back to lobsters. And that's kind of the joke that people always give with Dr. Jordan Peterson, is that lobsters are his favorite animal, because even in lobster colonies, they have hierarchies. There are some lobsters that win the duels and they end up being the leader of these colonies. And there's a direct line from our evolutionary background from lobsters all the way down to human beings. So what does this mean? It means no matter how much government force and centralized planning the left tries to put forth, they cannot perfect imperfectible vessels. And if you admit that human beings...
What the freaking hell did he just say? Are you serious? Is he... They cannot perfect imperfectible vessels. What do you think he means by that? I mean, he's pointing at himself. White man. They're not going to perfect what we've got going. The rich white elite. This paternalism thing that we have, this colonialism thing, like these ways that we've been moving, they're not going to improve on that. They might try, but we've got this down. It's what he's saying. I cannot. He's feeling very passionate right now.
Broken by nature, of which Candace and I do, then you must fight for a system that requires the individual to act in a virtuous way in order to be productive. And that's the free enterprise system. It's very hard to be massively successful while you lie, cheat, and steal all the time. Very, very difficult. You have to treat your employees well. You have to come up with a good idea. You have to pay your vendors on time. You can't borrow reckless amounts of money without paying it back. It requires virtue. In fact, it breeds virtue, where socialism does the exact opposite. To be successful in a socialist state, you run for office, you lie, you exploit the masses, and you repeat, cleanse, and repeat. And so if you come from the orientation that human beings are broken by nature, of which Candace and I do, there's only one system of governance and economics that supports that, and that is a free enterprise system supported by common law and constitutional government.
One more question.
Have you got any plans to target the left-wing bias in social media through like Facebook?
Okay, so yeah, this is really great. So first off, there is a new Twitter on the horizon called Parlay. Like French like to talk, P-A-R. No, it was really crazy. So I met the guy by chance like 3 weeks ago, the guy behind it. And I had seen, a lot of conservative platforms, oh, come to this instead, but nothing that really got me excited that I thought had the potential to take over Twitter or these giants. And this person, what he built was absolutely amazing to me. And it's in the early phase. You can download the app now. It's Parlay News. So last week, I'm in the Fox News green room getting ready for Judge Janine's show, and Charlie and I are going on together. And I mentioned to Charlie, I'm like, Charlie, download this now. They're not launching until February, and there are kinks, but grab your handle at Charlie. You can just, and I want to be at Candace. And suddenly, 48 hours later, from word of mouth in Fox News, it blew up overnight. We crashed Parlay News, and the founder was like, "Who did you tell?" And I said it in the green room. Yes, to go back to your question, we are going to have to make a leap. The power is always in the hands of the people. So we are letting them censor. And we know what's going on for people that didn't. I think the most alarming thing that happened this year in terms of social media censorship was Alex Jones. And I'll tell you why. Alex Jones was not just censored. He got censored on the very same day by YouTube, Facebook, and Apple. That means that these companies are colluding, okay? It would have been less alarming if it was, okay, 1 month he got kicked off of Facebook. It means that they had a conversation. They realized that he has a massive following, and he does, whether people love him or hate him, he has a massive following. And his censorship, to me, was the most alarming thing. But how do you win? Are we going to whine and cry and say, oh, Twitter removed my check mark and, oh, they deleted my tweet? Or are we going to all migrate to a platform? Twitter is successful because of conservatives, because of Donald Trump tweeting, okay? Because of people like me and Charlie tweeting, because we have high retweet ratios. If all of us flock and migrate to another platform and it's actually built well, that's how we defeat the companies. They need to have an audience, they need to have users. So Parlay News is it for Twitter. I don't know about Facebook. Facebook is actually in a weird predicament now because now the left hates them too. They're kind of, yeah, they're in a weird state right now. So they're interesting to watch. But I think it's a very important argument because the reason Donald Trump won is because he was able to get around the mainstream media. And the reason why the left wants to censor all of these platforms is because they realize that it allows us to say the Guardian lies. It doesn't matter. We're going to go on social media and we're going to have conversations and we're going to share relevant news. They want to stop that. They want to return to a world where you pick up the New York Times and you take it as Bible, where you read the Guardian and you take it as Bible. They want to make sure that they are the only source of information. But yeah, that's my answer. We definitely have to all migrate, and Parlay News, you guys download if you're on Twitter. They're going to be launching in February, but it's
So I do like a lot of these ideas, right? I do agree with the fact that the media at large wants to have control over what you assimilate, right? I do agree with the idea of creating our own outlets. I don't think that obviously anybody should go out and get this, whatever the hell she's talking about. But I'm saying as we think about our own community, we need to do the same and recognize that the indoctrination is real, okay? The propaganda is real and it's never ending. It's in the music that you like. It's on the television that you watch. It's on the advertisements. It's in the papers. It's on the radio. It's everywhere. We have to detach from that and start our own, right, propaganda systems. It's essential. And that's why I'm pushing for the Black Nationalist Party. Just to throw that out there again. Black Nationalist Party. It's time for us to do some indoctrination and some propaganda.
Platform, and I think that they can totally change the game.
I just wanted to say I hope UK will let you back in, because I don't know if you heard about Lauren Southern.
Look, I'm going to tell you right now. That's not going to end well.
No, sorry. No, because I don't know if you heard about Lauren Southern, a right-wing Canadian activist, was stopped from entering the UK because she was deemed not to be conducive to the public good. So,
well, they won't do it with us. I mean, we're way too close to the White House if that happens.
Okay, do you hear the question? First of all, that white lady was like, "Don't interrupt me." Okay, so they don't know how to act around their authorities because, you know, in England and the UK, they're very structured and all these people are richer than them. So she said Lauren Southern was banned from the UK because Lauren Southern is just a racist, right? In a pretty package. She asked, are you afraid you're going to get banned? And Candace's response was no. We're very close to the White House. Think about that. They said they're either going to say it or somewhere earlier that Trump sent them. And to show how full on in slave mode Candace is, listen very closely to her next few comments about Donald Trump. She is in full slave mode right about now.
Come on Air Force One and say, "Where's my Candace? Where's my Candace?" That won't happen with us. But I will. It's a very important argument because the reason Donald Trump won is because he was.
Yeah, let's back it up because you guys have to hear that in its entirety. She goes full slave. She's saying Donald Trump's going to come in Air Force One and be like, "Where's my Candace?"
Conversations, and we're going to share relevant news. They want to stop that. They want to return to a world where you pick up the New York Times and you take it as Bible, where you read the Guardian and you take it as Bible. They want to make sure that they are the only source of information. But yeah, that's my answer. We definitely have to all migrate, and Parlay News, you guys download if you're on Twitter. They're going to be launching in February, but it's a terrific platform, and I think that they can totally change the game.
I just wanted to say I hope UK will let you back in, because I don't know if you heard about Lauren Southern.
Look, I'm going to tell you right now. That's not going to end well.
No, sorry. No, because I don't know if you heard about Lauren Southern, a right-wing Canadian activist, was stopped from entering the UK because she was deemed not to be conducive to the public good. So,
well, they won't do it with us. I mean, we're way too close to the White House if that happens. The president's going to come on Air Force One and say, "Where's my Candace? Where's my Candace?" That won't happen with us. But I will say, I'm against just provocative sense of politics for provocative, sake. I know that I think Lauren Southern went into a Muslim neighborhood and with like Allah is gay signs, and probably not the best way for us to win. I really think that we have to have a better argument. Having discussions that are meaningful on college campuses and winning in that way is better. She shouldn't have been banned. I mean, it's insane that she got banned.
So Lauren Southern putting on an Allah is gay sign. Candace goes, that's probably not the best way for us to win. So what, is she in the same camp as Lauren Southern? Because Lauren Southern is an ardent racist. She's over there making films about how white South African farmers are being wronged and crap. Okay, Lauren Southern is a straight up racist. And Candace is talking about that's not the best way for us to win. Just to be clear on what side she's on. She just put herself on a side.
absolutely that she got banned, but we see a lot of this happening in the conservative movement where people get kicked off of a platform and we're like, well, this could have been avoided if we weren't just being provocative for the sake of being provocative, because we have better ideas. We don't need to provoke anybody. They're going to be provoked by us just saying there's 2 genders. That's a fact, biological fact, right? So we don't need to go the extra mile to see if we can upset people to start a conversation. We just need to stick to the facts, and that's how we win, in my personal opinion.
You've told us this evening about some of your plans for the UK, mirroring some of the great, fantastic work that you've done in the States. My question or point is fairly simple. One of the major differences between the UK and the US is that we do not have a Donald Trump. What is your response to that point?
Yet.
Yet.
Yeah, and so look, I'm going to let Candace just brought a great point, so I want to make her comment on it. But you have to understand that Donald Trump was a movement that was 40 years in the making. And I could do an extended speech about this, but the conservative movement, for those of you that have been fighting in the trenches for 30 years, it went from Goldwater to Reagan to Ross Perot challenging H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton to the Tea Party movement in opposition to Barack Obama. That Donald Trump, yes, he's a once-in-a-generation type charismatic. He is relentless. It's his greatest attribute. He is relentless, and his work ethic is second to none, and his patriotism is just right to the core. But there was a well-funded conservative movement in place of pro-life groups, of pro-Second Amendment groups, of state Republican parties, of donor groups that were already synergized, that when Donald Trump came and he won that nomination, they said, all right, now we're ready to bring you, to the presidency. And a lot of that infrastructure proved to be consequential in states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. What's my point? Is that you can't just hope for a British Donald Trump, because you need an infrastructure behind that. You need a grassroots machine. You need a social media response to the Labor Party, and Donald Trump deserves the credit of the impossibility of winning against the Bush machine, against the Clinton machine, and the media machine.
What did Donald Trump really do? If we hearken back to that book, what group of whites did the author say were the ones that did the lynchings, were the ones, well, he said did the lynchings, right? Were the ones out killing blacks. It was the lower class whites that had to compete with blacks because they had a lot of disdain for being in that position, since we are to serve them under the paternalistic system. Donald Trump was able to mobilize them and pull them over to sympathize. I watch something y'all don't know about me is I watch white racist lives on YouTube. So when white racists have their lives, I go and I watch. First of all, these people give a lot of money to each other. Let's just say that. Second of all, after they give a lot of money to each other, they will be, I literally watched one live like the day before yesterday where one guy put up $10 and was like, talking about he was caping for billionaires. I'm like, you can only afford to give $10. And with your $10, you're going to cape for a billionaire? Another guy gave $5. Started talking about how everybody attacks the wealthy. Really? Poor whites, indoctrinated because of Donald Trump to want to protect the wealthy, because the whites that are on the other side of the coin, the liberal whites who engage in using black people as pawns while at the same time committing genocide and locking up our people, right? Returning them to slavery. That's what poor whites want to do. That's what liberal whites want to do. They want to return us to slavery via prison and kill us, commit genocide against us via abortion. And to some degree, it can be argued through admixing, right? And then you have the conservative whites who don't want to admix with us at all because they need a very clear class of people to serve them. So this conversation is very interesting because what Donald Trump did is he was able to pull those poor whites into the paternalistic agenda without giving them access to any of the paternalistic leaders' money, to the great white father's money. That's pretty clutch for those rich white people because we get all of our underling whites to pander to our agenda and protect us in our elitism, which is how whiteness works, right? Poor whites protecting wealthy whites. They've got their queens, their dukes, their duchesses. Hell, this was put on by a lord. That's who funded this, right? Was a lord. A lord. That's a hell of a title. Though, and that means a direct descendant of the queen, right? Because this is nobility. This meeting is funded by nobility. Just to put this in perspective, what they're trying to rein in and why they're happy with Donald Trump.
It was also a 40-year battle against the left that made some of it possible.
I will say that there's a natural domino effect, so I like that he said the word yet, because Donald Trump created Candace Owens. There was no black conservative voice going after the black vote saying we can do it, but because I saw Donald Trump and he said it, and I was so shocked and it was so disruptive, it woke me up, and then I became, you know, Xena warrior princess for the conservative cause. And 2 years ago, I was a liberal. Look at how invested I got into this, because that's how much it mattered once I felt like the wool was pulled over my eyes. So that energy is going to happen here too. So maybe Donald Trump starts in America. He creates Candace Owens. Charlie Kirk's just, I don't know, 18 and too ambitious. But and we come to the college campuses, and you're somebody's going to rise up in that. They're going to say, oh my gosh, they said it first, but I really believe in this. And this is something that we need to bring home. And I totally believe that you're going to see someone, rise to the top of the ranks very quickly out of nowhere. Donald Trump had no political background, and he won the U.S. election and defeated the entire mainstream media and two establishment families, the Bushes and the Clintons.
And remember, it was a whole group of characters that brought forth Maggie Thatcher. It wasn't just her. I mean, she was she was once in a generation type leader. But the intellectual support from the Bill Buckleys of the world, and the support domestically in the States with Ronald Reagan. And so it takes many, many years to get that put forth. But the cool thing is things move faster today than ever.
Did this fool say Ronald Reagan? Just so we know what page they're on. I mean, they're calling out all the old racists. They're pulling every old racist out of the box. The Ronald Reagan. Let's just throw some names out there. Like, for sure, really?
Because of social media. Candace Owens, 18 months ago, was not involved in politics at all. Now she's a thermonuclear weapon against the left on 6 continents.
First of all, guys, if either of you want to run for Prime Minister in this country, you're more than welcome. We'd all be supportive. First of all, congratulations, Charlie and Candace, on your success so far. It's really, really inspiring, and we're hoping that we can replicate something like this over here. And I know I can speak from...
They are hoping they can replicate what Candace Owens is doing in Europe. Her infiltration, they want that in Europe.
In this room, well, to say we're at your service. I want to pick up on what Stephen asked, which was he asked you about how you frame arguments. My question is, do you think you should also we should be careful on which topics we discuss with people or focus on more? The reason is because young people on campuses, they're not paying taxes, right? So to talk to them about that might be tricky, whereas identity politics might be something you focus on more. So the question, because, if you're a straight white male, you're being attacked when you go onto campus, and you can relate to those arguments. So the question is, are there topics that are better to focus on than others, in your opinion, and ones to shy away from?
No, so we let them create a line and they bring the topics to us. They'll let us know what they care about. We're just prepared to answer and deconstruct all of their knowledge.
So they're talking about a strategy they use, but remind you that all this money in the room, because these are extremely wealthy people. Like I said, a lord put this on, okay? That means royalty money put on this private engagement that they're having right now. And they're asking these questions because it's not like me or you asking a question. They have the money and the influence. So if he goes, well, what approach should we take? Is there something we need to focus on more than others? Or is there some way we can help you? What is going to be our strategy for this? Then these people have the power to go make sure that gets in on the news. right? Because this is backed by royalty. These people have the power to make sure that this agenda can be pushed heavily. And I hope we're not missing the part when they're talking about spreading
property
it.
rights work and that markets solve problems and entrepreneurs are modern day heroes. So we can approach any sort of problem, and we're also against identity politics and in favor of free speech. And so there's nothing that the left can throw at us that we cannot counter. And it really helps because it gives them the first platform to put forth their ideas. So we'll sit back and we'll say, tell us what you believe. And they'll say, communism is a great idea. Okay, how's that been working for you? 100 times it's been tried over the last 100 years, 100 million people dead. Everywhere it's been tried, it has failed. They've never been countered with that sort of. So that we have the principles and we back it up.
Yeah, just a quick story. One of my favorite moments on college campus this year was obviously in the heat of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. And these kids were really fired up. And we went out and I was wearing a #HimToo shirt in response to the radicalized Me Too. Because why not, right? So I'm standing on stage and of course this guy steps to the mic and he's like, Candace, how could you as a woman not believe women when they say that they were sexually assaulted? I just don't understand that. And I said, okay, let's try it your way. You sexually assaulted me. And he was like, what? I was like, you sexually assaulted me. You just have to believe me, and everyone in the room starts getting riled up. Would you want everyone to just believe me? Should you be convicted? I said it, I'm a woman. And being able to do that, to take.
Now, I agree with this, but I'm not a leftist, right? I agree with the Me Too movement is out of control. You guys know that I feel it's being weaponized against Lieutenant Governor Fairfax. Me Too is bullshit. It's just a good way to keep control over people because most of the people in power are men. Most of the people in power are white men. But if all you need is a woman to say that you violated her body in some way, you can control all the men. Okay, you can control all the men that way. And so I disapprove of that too.
Now, it sounds to me like that, I don't know for a fact, but the age you're talking to at universities is slightly older than that. So we have an issue here. Would you be prepared to be talking to kids that are much younger?
Without a doubt. By the way, that's one of the worst ideas I could possibly imagine, to lower the voting age. So fight against that at all costs.
Basically saying we want people whose brains aren't developed to be able to vote. That's what he's basically saying. He's saying they get smarter with time, they have responsibilities, they realize how things can go. So we need people, let's just have 8-year-olds voting. I mean, that's really what they're doing. They're dialing back the age because even by 18, you're at university. You have a little bit of experience because you're out of your mother's house. And you really still live in a utopia world when you're 16 years old and everything's paid for and you just go home and mom's got dinner on the table. That really infuriates me.
And so, by the way, with Jeremy Corbyn, please, I'd love to be part of this. Call him the anti-Semite that he is, for goodness sakes. We would excommunicate him from American politics. He would not be allowed to serve. He would not be allowed.
Oh, snap. Jews are backing this? Oh, I should have known. They all looked white. I mean, Jews are white, but dang, they have control over everything, don't they? When did white people care about anti-Semitism? You tell me. This just took a whole new turn. It's like plot twist. Last 5 minutes.
Time again is anti-Semitic. So please, just every day, just say, you mean the anti-Semite, Jeremy Corbyn, just say it in every single pattern of language and sentence. So
Trump is brilliant at that. Talk about a culture war. He will brand it. Lion Ted, Hillary, you'd be in prison, lock her up, little Marco. These things stick into people's minds and they start to associate that. So sometimes it really is, Jew hater Jeremy. You say these things and people start to go, oh my gosh, this person is this, and they start to look for it. So I really do believe that a major reason that Hillary lost is because Donald Trump was using nicknames for everybody.
I'll say one thing to close it up. So great things happen when Americans and Brits get together for a common cause. And we couldn't be more honored and thankful for all of you to take your time tonight to learn more about what we're doing. But we didn't just come here to give a speech. So Candace and I, we are pundits, we are spokespeople, but we are committed activists too. And we can't allow the left just to control that term activist. So we want to bring this to the UK. And so there's a variety of ways you can help. Again, we're not here to ask for capital, but that will be needed somewhere down the road. So if that at all interests you or you're in a position to learn more about that, you could talk to John or some of our other very good friends in the room. And we will be back bringing this message all across the United Kingdom and then Europe. We have, I have books there that two of My bestsellers are there. Please take one. I want to leave empty-handed, and we'd love to have you, read the book and learn more about what we're doing. But again, we couldn't be more thankful for your time. And this is a time that 50 years from now we'll remember this 5-year window. We'll remember what happened. It could have gone one way or the other. And Candace and I have dedicated our lives to make sure that a free society in Western civilization is preserved and defended. So, thank you so much.
We'll come to you. Stay here. Tyrone, I just wanted to really, I think I'm speaking for all of us. We thought long and hard. I know that there are many, many people in this room who feel as passionately as we do. And we wanted you to have a little memento of your visit to London. And so we organized.
He's going to give them a damn award. I can't with this mess.
Oh, they probably have one in New York. There you go. Well, there you go. And what this is if anybody would like to put a little message to Candace and Charlie for coming here and how they really truly feel about this evening. And if they want to be contacted in the future, they can put their contact details in it. It'll be on the table on the way out with plenty of pens. And if you'd just like to make a little note in it as to how you feel about this evening, sometimes the more conservative of us put our thoughts into words better than we do, on stage. But it's been very, very emotional for me personally.
Give it up for John.
Yes.
I just want to say I am so impressed by the fact that you answer the questions, so cleverly, and your confidence, I hope, will spread amongst everyone here. So you just need to sprinkle a little of that stardust here, and we hope it grows. So yeah, well done to both of you. For two kids who haven't been to university, you're not selling universities very well. But anyway, I'm going to tell my kids later.
Yeah, no, they're not going to marry her. These people will never marry her. Now, that Meghan Markle crap, they played that because she, damn near white. But none of them will marry her. They wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole. Those are not those kind of whites. They're not the admixing whites. They're not about to do that. She's going to find that out sooner rather than later. So with that said, you guys, I kind of knew that this was going to run long because the actual thing is like an hour long and I talk. So there's that thing. Me always stopping it and saying stuff does make things go longer. Cynthia G, I think that when you were saying that a lot of us won't get that these people are our servants, the government are our servants, the police are there to enforce the laws that we told our servants to make, right? And that we have a misconception as to who's in charge in this relationship and how we need to move people out of their positions if they don't know how to act. Those are not people that we need to acquiesce to, but we take a subservient position. I think that that's really a good point, and hopefully we can delve into that. Yeah, Sin, I think that we should have that conversation. I don't know when you want to have that conversation, but I think that's a very important conversation. Although I will say, I'm going to say a lot of stuff. Okay, I don't know what you mean, Cradell, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to approve your comment. So with that said, you guys, I'm going to end this particular live just because it's literally been 2 hours and I'm sorry for that. But from beginning to end, from her degrading herself, degrading Black people, degrading her family, to basically saying nothing was wrong with Hitler, she was not taken out of context. You guys can officially say you watched the whole damn thing. And she was in full on white tongue in the butt mode. Okay. She was like doing the absolute most. So that Hitler comment was not out of context. Okay. But I think the most interesting thing with this is that this was backed by the money of royalty. If you go back to the beginning of this live, it shows the names of the people and the Lord, and that there was one other person of royal lineage that backed this in collaboration with the President of the United States. And that the plan includes recruiting whites from Australia. I can't remember, you guys might remember the other European non-landlocked countries that they mentioned. And so I think that this was interesting. You know, one of the sisters in the chat said it's kind of like their game plan, and it is. We just listened to a few pages out of their playbook moving forward, and note that they put themselves on a 5-year timeline, which means they must be thinking that President Trump is going to get reelected, because that would make a 5-year timeline, wouldn't it? So that's something to consider. And that means that we too should be knowing that they're going to put the full force of some of this propaganda and some of this behavior on that 5-year timeline. So maybe it's time that we move a little quicker. And my 4-year-old's here. So you want to say bye? Bye. Okay, bye, you guys. I'll talk to you later.